the Mindset Athlete Podcast, and I'm your host, James Roberts. I'm a two-time Paralympian and owner of James Robert Fitness, which is an online training, nutrition and mindset coaching business. First of all, I'd like to thank Lauren Williams for suggesting this quote to the show. An athlete is a mindset. It's how you prepare, think and execute. Not because of some elite status or physical stature. Anybody can be an athlete. By Chris Harth. And each week on the Mindset Athlete, we like to bring you inspirational athletes, a message, or experts talking about human optimization to teach you how to change your perception of your mindset and become 1% better. And on today's show, I've got Sean Quinn. Sean is a mental conditioning consultant with elite experience from some of the US's top performance training venues. A graduate of the University of California, Davis in human development, Sean also earned his master's degree in sports psychology from JFK University. He is a certified consultant with the Association for Applied Sports Psychology and has obtained thousands of hours working with clients from diverse backgrounds, including professionals in baseball, football, basketball, soccer, tennis, and the golf world, as well as executives from a variety of top corporations. After completing his studies, Sean gained valuable experience in the performance space at the IMG Academy in Florida and also the Exos in Phoenix, Arizona, working as a mental conditioning consultant for some of the US's top youth, amateur, and professional athletes. So welcome onto the show, Sean.
James, thanks for having me today. Looking forward to it.
The pleasure's been all mine. So I'll give some context to the listeners. And obviously I will talk a little bit less because I've got a sore throat and people probably appreciate, they want to hear you more than me. Obviously you and I had a conversation as a pre-interview because you wanted to see if it would be a good fit. And we had a 3-hour conversation that obviously nobody will hear. But obviously I wanted to get you back on for sure and share your experiences and obviously your experience with working with every level athlete.
Yeah, no, we had a great conversation, and I look forward to having another one here and then talk about kind of this elite performance and how we can kind of, all of us can kind of get better, especially during this day and age and what's going on throughout the world.
And obviously straight off the bat, Sean, why did you want to get into obviously performance sport? Or more specifically, like sports psychology within performance sport?
I think I've always had a passion just to help people. And so just kind of age-old question why people do what they do is something that's always kind of fascinated me. I don't think it's ever going to be something that will be answered. There's genetics behind it. There's environment behind it. But, why some athletes kind of thrive and why some just kind of seem to not kind of get over that cusp. So kind of looking at that, found out there was actually a profession in sports psychology and helping athletes deal with pressure. But even on top of that, it's a lot of life skills too. So helping people in general get better. And so I kind of it was a kind of a match that worked out well and really kind of had a few doors open, which some lucky opportunities. Came across a few people and have some great mentors that have come across my way throughout my life. But also, meeting Trevor Mawad and working with Trevor, for the last 6 years has really helped me, just kind of see, what happens in the professional space. And I've been fortunate enough to develop a practice myself where I have a lot of professional athletes across the board. But, it's always interesting to see what makes them tick and what they do, but also, they're human beings just like we all are. And so emotions, problems, family situations, they have it just like we all do. And so helping them kind of navigate the seas too. So, when it can get rough, how they get through it, but also, when they're doing well and they're thriving, what's leading to that success.
And you talked about obviously developing confidence through experience. And that's actually interesting to me because I've never thought of it from that basis because always people will ask me, and I'll use this interview as the more for the evidence, do athletes struggle with confidence? I was like, no, it's more probably borderline arrogance. It's more maybe what they struggle with is like self-belief and obviously you talked about self-positive talk.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think you need to develop confidence through experience? So do you think it's more of it's a learned behavior than a taught behavior?
It's a little bit of both. I think we have to become aware, right? And so if we can become aware of the situations, be aware of what happens, how we respond to certain situations, then we can make adjustments. And so once we see how what happens in a certain event, a certain scenario, we say, hey, this worked, or hey, this maybe didn't work quite as well. Here's the adjustments I need to make. And so I would say there's something to having a past experience in a certain moment, but also you kind of know what to expect rather than having the fear of the unknown maybe take over, where it may be a new sporting venue, it may be a hostile situation where you're playing against a rival team in an environment you haven't been to, so you don't know what to expect, and so your mind can wander. If I know what to expect when I go into a stadium or against a certain opponent, I can plan for that, and I can prepare my mind for that too. But, I think a lot of times we can rely back on certain situations that might be similar if it is something that's new, so that we can prepare ourselves, but also knowing that, we're doing all the right things to get us in the situation to thrive. If it is an Olympic moment, right, where it's your first time going to the Olympics, for instance, what have I done for the previous 3.5 years to get myself in this position to be here? My experience through training, what I've done each day to kind of prepare myself, and then ultimately leading to the big event, but also normalizing it in a way where we can sit there and say, hey, look, the hardest part was the last 3.5 years of getting myself to this point to be here. Now that I'm here, let's kind of show off my exploits. Let's show off what I've done to be able to earn the spot to be in the Olympics, as opposed to looking back and saying, I have to do well, I must do well. And changing the mindset that I must perform, as opposed to let's go out there and do what I do, and let's do it well, the same way I've been doing it for the last 3.5 years, or the rest of my life leading up to it, as well.
And you talk about like uncertainty there, Sean. Do you think? Oh, and I won't put assumptions in here. I'll ask you point blank. You as a coach, and we were talking before we started recording that you and I both have a shared love of Manchester United. Mm-hmm. Have you said to your clients to look to sport in Europe as a model to prepare for obviously their uncertainty to go back to their seasons? Or have you kind of looked at it more as an ad hoc, looking at case by case?
It's interesting because it is a little bit different in the States than it is in Europe, just with case numbers, management, how things are going. And so I think you can certainly take a look and just say, hey, look what's going on in Europe. They're able to safely and successfully kind of, have a season and run through it. But also knowing that, our numbers are still rising. We haven't really got a grip on what's going on here. And so understand that in a controlled environment, it's going to help you be safer. But, we still have to be smart. And so making sure that we're making the right decisions. We're not putting ourselves or our teammates in jeopardy by going out in public and trying to not adhere to just maybe some of the rules that some of the leagues are doing. And I think you're seeing it a little bit in Major League Baseball right now, where a couple of teams, were maybe a little bit laxed after 3 weeks of a quarantine, and the season has started up, and now you're seeing, whole teams kind of shut down for, a week, 10 days at a time, which ultimately doesn't just affect that one team, but affects the team they have to play. And so collectively as a whole, I think, in order to make sure that the league, continues, you have to be able to kind of not just think about yourself, but think about the rest of the people that are playing as well, so that you can make this a reality, as opposed to, going back to where it was in March and, having cancellation of everything. And, and not only just the not being able to play, but, there's real monetary losses there for a lot of the players. And while one guy may be set because he has a contract, for that's guaranteed for 6 years, there might be another guy who's just coming up who, maybe a rookie or needs that money to survive, and they're doing everything they can to get by, but you're putting them at risk because you're making risky decisions. So really, I think it's being selfless rather than selfish. And so having a conversation built around that.
And obviously, we discussed about, with collegiate sport, collegiate football more specifically, when we talk about collegiate sport, going back. Do you think the Ivy League, by their stance to cancel, I think it was every sport in the fall and the winter, has made the right decision when it comes to, obviously, collegiate sport?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I certainly do. And I think, kind of looking at that, they obviously weighed their pros and cons, saw what was safest in their minds, for their students. And a lot of times, the Ivy League in general, most universities there don't give out scholarships. They're, academic oriented, and, obviously they're have tremendous pedigree, with, the students that go through those doors. But, from what I understand, a lot of the universities, in the Ivy League are all going, virtual anyways. So, not a lot of students on campus. And so for them, I think that they're, trying to, kind of adhere to their values and what they believe, and then saying that, hey, look, we're not going to try and put our students at risk, to attain this. And so, I think, for each university, it's a little bit different. Each conference, is a little bit different in sport. And so, I think right now they're, obviously the kids want to play if it's safe. But how do we make it safe so that, when you have 100 kids on one side of the stadium and you have 100 kids on another, and they're going to battle, that they're not passing it on to others. And so testing, how do you quarantine 100 college football students, and so it's going to be an interesting case study for sure. So, I hope for everyone's sake that, health and everything else, that they do it right, because, that's, a lot of times, also looking at their amateurs, they're not getting paid either. So, what they're getting paid is room and board, but also some experience, and, they're being developed, but hopefully, they're being developed in a way where, it's safe, as opposed to putting themselves at risk or putting their families at risk too.
And I think what we also alluded to, they're also young men, so they're going to make, obviously, rash decisions. Some are going to be more mature than others, and ultimately that is a course of life. You learn from your mistakes, and that's very much experience. But obviously, would you talk about selflessness? It's a difficult word to say. It's going to be very difficult for them, because ultimately, depending on what conference they come from, we'll use the SEC because generally, football speaking, it is the power conference. No disrespect to anybody who's in a different school in a different conference, but just for this example, I'll use it. University of Alabama. They've gone to that school to be like the stepping stone to make the NFL. So that I think I did watch a video on LinkedIn last week about they were actually utilizing technology and actually making these players develop in a different way and be a bit more, I won't say street smart, but be more game aware, because they can learn more about the system, their position, and be almost like a professional, and using this time of downtime to become better. So I see, and this is only my own opinion, that's probably going to make them more of a juggernaut going forward.
Yeah, and that's you and I had a conversation before talking about adjusting and adapting to certain situations, and I think that's where Alabama is certainly ahead of the curve, where they've been able to adjust and adapt to certain situations that some may say is adverse, or hey, we're not going to be able to develop, but finding a way to develop and to adjust to the times so that they're still, on the cutting edge as opposed to falling behind the times. And I think, you mentioned just, them being kids and, it's a younger audience, certainly. You have 19-year-olds, you have 18-year-olds, some schools even 17-year-olds, just coming out of high school, going to school, kids as old as 23, 24, maybe some graduate students, 25, but, certainly different from professional leagues. And if the professional league's struggling with it, how's it going to be for the collegiate football? And so I think that starts with your structure as well. And really, it starts from the top. So, you have to be able to have some sort of, just guidelines, some sort of enforcement with your head coach, your coaches, so that guys understand, hey, this is real, and if we don't adhere to it, we won't be out here playing, and then ultimately will affect their draft stock for the next year because they're not getting the opportunities to go out there and play, and guys aren't able to see them or see them develop, so they may not take a risk on drafting a kid that hasn't played in a year or who's only kind of known by potential alone, but not putting on tape or doing anything against the opponent. So I think it's an interesting kind of conundrum, but ultimately it goes back to that selflessness again, as opposed to being selfish.
And obviously, we talked about this previously, Sean. That the adversity of going into a hostile environment of, I don't know, if I use LSU's Death Valley to just for example, or Clemson's. I can't think of the name of it. I apologize to the people from that university.
Clemson's Death Valley as well. They both have the same.
And going into some of those hostile environments, do you think if they are to play and COVID has an impact on more, I'll call it the stadium experience of playing in front of hostile crowds, as they are, because this is where probably the American supports differ from Europeans. You're not going to have as many traveling support. Do you think it's going to be weird for those athletes because ultimately they've never experienced it? Well, they've played in small high school arenas. Okay, except probably the ones playing in Texas and things like that, who play in Premier League style stadiums at a high school level. Do you think if they were to adopt, be it, I'll use the Premier League's model because obviously France is playing in front of crowds. Do you think those athletes, some of them, are going to struggle because ultimately they use that cue to really get them going?
Definitely. I had this conversation literally probably 2.5 weeks ago with a Major League Baseball player, just talking about playing in an empty stadium. And we really talked about, really kind of, we've talked a lot in the past about not worrying about the external factors that we can't control, whether it's crowd noise, where you're at, situationally, what's happening. We have to go out there and kind of, put blinders on and go out and do what we need to do. And so, with that being said, now it's more, it's enhanced where that's it. There's no noise. There's nothing now. They're doing, artificial noise after the scene, what's, the kind of positive effects of just, I think it's more viewership, but, of the Premier League and some of the European, leagues. But, looking at that, it's definitely real because, they have to get to a certain spot, to be able to kind of, get themselves prepared. And they've been able to do that and use noise as a way to get them there. And, lack of that and having a void, they have to kind of channel it somewhere else, to be able to kind of get them ready. But, from a stadium standpoint, I think it loses a little bit of edge for some of these other teams where if you're looking at, going into a hostile environment like LSU or Clemson or, some of these major universities, where you're hearing a lot of kind of crowd noise and knowing that you're the opponent. I think it kind of, it doesn't equal the playing field as far as competition wise, but as far as having that as far as potential and what the athletes they may have, but it decreases an external variable that may be in your favor, being a home team and having that home team advantage by having that lack of noise, having that lack of crowd noise, and having an opposing team coming in there and being fearful of a threat that they might have viewed, as the noise, as the sound, that's no longer there. So, I think it's going to be interesting to see that come about, in kind of college football, if we have it, just because I think that is that is a variable that has come into play. But, certainly as far as the individual athlete, we call it the zone of optimal functioning. And that's where we kind of operate the best as an athlete. When you go out there to try and perform, a lot of times, sound is something that enhances and gets them to a certain area where they say, hey, it's game time, it's ready to go. So that's where they're having to fill that void to get them to this spot where they can kind of operate at a high level. And so, what are they doing? Everyone's a little bit different, but what are they doing to kind of fill that void and to still be able to get to where they need to be so that they can perform at a high level up to their standard, as opposed to feeling and kind of using that fuel as some of the stuff from the noise that they hear.
Did you not prefabricate that, the artificial noise? Like on a CD or, okay, I'm showing my age a little bit, like on an MP3 file, and to be, instead of using music as the motivational tool, which a lot of athletes will do, and I was no different, could that athlete not use that technology
Certainly
to have crowd noise that they listen to beforehand, or whatever, what's going to get them, the juices flowing?
Certainly, and that's pregame. They certainly can, and we often talk about, creating a playlist, whether it's music that can get them pumped up, but also music that can slow them down. Now, you can also incorporate maybe some crowd noise, but and I think that's also kind of a caveat that's helping with some of these sports is maybe pumping in some of that sound, whether it may be their walk-up songs for a baseball player that's coming up to the plate in between innings, to try and normalize what they're used to hearing, some of the stimulus that they're used to hearing. But looking at that, when they get out there though, and when there is that kind of, they look around and they see that there's no one there, they see that void, how are they able to kind of hone it back into where they need to be and to say, hey, it's the same thing we've always played throughout. Let's go out there and execute the way that we know how, as opposed to, kind of giving life to a stimuli that's not there, and saying this is weird and letting our mind wander. But, to go back to that question too, I think also for, some young players who might be coming up as well, could be used as an advantage, because they don't become quote unquote starstruck. They don't become, in a way, enamored by the crowd, the noise, who they're going against, and they kind of go about just doing their business and doing what they know what to do. That's earned them a spot to be there, as opposed to drawing off of, I'm playing in Yankee Stadium with 45,000 people. I'm playing for the Red Sox, and they, it's a big moment, and they're booing me, or they're against me, and having that kind of weigh in. I'm able to block that out easy because that's not a factor anymore. Or that isn't a factor that I don't have to experience at this moment. So, I think there's a multitude of kind of situations and scenarios that play here, but I think it's different for all kinds of guys, whether it's your rookie or your 12-year veteran, or you're in baseball. I'll go back to baseball, but a Major League Baseball closer, for instance, who wants to be amped up, really kind of charged, so that they come running in and they kind of are fueled by that noise, or the sound of the song they have when they run out there, and it's not there. And so how do they channel that energy from a different light, as opposed to being worried about this is different. I don't know if I can do what I do because it's not normal for me. It's not my normal routine.
Do you think in that basis then, Sean, visualization is even more key for an athlete now then?
Certainly. And I think, with visualization in general, it's can be, really powerful. But I think it's making the shift from, when you really want to enhance your visualization, you want to make sure that you're really kind of using all your senses. It's what we see in our eyes. It's what we hear. It's what we feel. But really kind of incorporating the senses so that we really feel as if we're there. And so visualization of what we may have done last year, years before, and years past may be a little different now, just because the situations are different. Again, you're not going to be simulating in your mind, looking around and seeing a bunch of people in the stands. You might see cardboard cutouts, but that's not going to be there. And so how do we visualize this new visualization script in our minds where we're kind of enhancing and we're seeing all the things that are there now as opposed to what was there maybe a year ago or 2 years ago. But yeah, visualization can be important because, kind of as we talked about, in the beginning, it gives us a sense of control because we're living a experience in our mind that we're seeing, and so it gives us a sense of us being there, and so that when we do go through these moments, we feel as if, hey, we're here, we've been here before, and let's focus on what we can control as opposed to the things that we can't control.
Do you think it's also going a step further than that as well, Sean, with utilizing that visualization alongside attention and emotional control? Because ultimately, yes, you want to have attention in terms of execution with the play, be it swinging the bat, throwing a pitch, and not having that stimulus of the crowd enacting towards the umpire. Obviously, that's an emotional attachment. So is it very much a case of being kind of laser focused in one sense, having blinkers on as well, and then taking some of the emotion out of what was the case normality a year ago, 2 years ago?
Yeah, and it really is kind of adjusting to the times, but also, we always want to kind of have a little bit of that focus internally as well, on that internal focus as opposed to external. And so it's making sure that's still the focal point, but also not gravitating towards, the situation. But yeah, I mean, I think even looking at umpires, are they influenced by lack of noise? Maybe they would have, called a strike or a ball differently if they had a crowd to react to say, hey, that's a bad call, as opposed to they're not hearing that anymore. Because it can be subjective back there. When we talk about the NFL, we talk about college football as well.
Yeah.
Is there going to be as many flags on, certain plays because you're going to have a reaction that's not there anymore based on crowd noise?
Well, I think people need to take a perspective as well, and I think, and I'll give this some context because I talked to a head official, William Woodrow basketball, a couple of years ago. It's like, well, do you make a bad pass? Do you take a bad shot? We make mistakes too. I was like, okay, you're human, and I think that element of obviously the players themselves, if they were reflective and took a step back, would have a little bit more empathy towards an official than maybe a fan, ultimate coach. Sometimes yes, sometimes no, because ultimately their job's online. But I think where I'm going to come with this, Sean, I read somebody shared on LinkedIn, I think a couple of days ago, this was the season they were going to put in, obviously, robot umpires into the MLB. So whether or not, I don't know why they couldn't, because ultimately this is your chance to experiment a little bit more because we're in a time of uncertainty anyway. What's the worst that can happen? It might get it better. It might get it worse. And then for sure, well, we can either dispel this myth of a robot technology is better than a human being, or it's not.
Yeah, I know I heard them talk about it. I know they've done it in the minor leagues a little bit, but I think players, I think if you ask a player, a lot of times they're going to say they'd rather have an umpire back there regardless. And as you mentioned, we're all human, and that we're not robots. And so there will be errors. There will be mistakes that are had. And so, I think with that being said, I think what umpires strive to do is just try and be as consistent as possible. They're not going to be perfect, as the same way that an athlete's not going to be perfect. They're going to make a mistake, but I think incorporating robot umpires could be something too, where umpires, umpires union may not look too highly on that, saying, hey, just for this 1 year, we're going to do robot umpires. We're going to go back to you guys next year. And with that being said, they're not getting paid to have a replacement umpire as a robot. So they're out of a job for a year. So are they going to be more prone to come back? And if it doesn't work, you can look at the NFL, for instance, a few years back with having replacement refs. And, that didn't work out so well as far as, they made a lot of mistakes. So they weren't on the same level as a professional umpire was. So if you do have umpires that are upset about that and upset about using a robot umpire, how well the next guys that are going to step in if you do go back to the old system. So I think a lot of questions to be had. With that being said, I know the game's adjusted in certain ways to try and prevent injuries, whereas extra innings are now they have a guy on second base, which is something that's obviously a little bit different from the past. They're having double headers now with 7 innings instead of going to full 9 to try and protect some arms, so pitchers aren't getting hurt. But and then the DH is universal, so designated hitters across the board in the American and National League, which is obviously something that's never been done. And so we'll see what they're doing, but they're saying that's all on a trial basis, and the Players Association has agreed to that. But more because of the health of the players, as opposed to trying to incorporate some new a new technology, a new system in order to play the game, where it may change the integrity of what we see in the game, and for the good or the bad. But I don't think they've really gone to that yet. I think what the changes they've made have more based on player health, as opposed to trying to enhance the game in a certain way.
Do you think there's a place for technology? Be it what I'm going to use as an example, like crowd interference it's be it. It's happened more in the playoffs than the regular season, and it's obviously changed the tie of the series. Do you think for the MLB more specifically, because obviously every other North American sport has some sort of television teleprompter to either overturn a decision in one way, do you think that would maybe be a good case in point? It's like, well, if it wasn't for this, okay, this fan is not actually an issue now. But if that was to come up and the fan has taken away the ball and the outfielder would have caught it, obviously that changes a decision massively. Or be it the other example, like it's borderline, is it a foul or is it a home run?
Yeah.
Looking at the camera and saying, well, no, it's a foul ball, and being able to look at the trajectory of the ball, specifically like using golf as probably the one for like a driving shot off the tee, and being able to look at this ball was going out play versus obviously in play.
And even tennis too, right? Tennis does that to an extent too, with was it in, was it out? But I think there's definitely some good with some technological advances with replay and being able to use the resources that are had. I think from what I've been able to gather now is that Major League Baseball, they don't look at the home team's video feed anymore, where they have in the past. It goes to New York, and then New York has their own feed where they can kind of look at whatever replays they see in order to New York being the headquarters for baseball, and so that they can kind of make a ruling based on what they see, as opposed to only having a select feeds at their disposal. Now, and I've thought about this, and then, this is just kind of, I haven't thought too deep, but, some of the crowd noise too, I'd be really curious to see how that goes down the line in the future. Are they going to pump in, are stadiums going to pump in artificial crowd noise when fans do come back? And so, to make it louder in certain moments? Are they going to be allowed to do that? Because now, I mean, with what they're doing now, they're going to be able to kind of perfect this in a way where, without fans, they're going to be able to say, hey, we know how to do this and recreate a situation that makes it sound as if they're there. Well, what happens when they come back and all of a sudden you want it to get louder? Are you going to start pumping in crowd noise? And you've heard it a little bit in the NFL where guys have said, oh, there's some stadiums we go and play that it sounds as if some artificial noise there. So it'll be interesting to see if they allow that or if they regulate that too.
Does it, in your experience, Sean, does it have an impact on the professional player, that actual manipulation of the environment?
I think it depends on the player. I think it depends on the situation. I think it depends on the environment as well. I think a lot of times guys will just see it as white noise or hear it as white noise. Just because it's just so much that they just can't even decipher what's being said or what's being heard. I think sometimes, obviously, with noise, when it goes above and beyond, it can be something that we can kind of, it's a natural reaction to kind of see what's going on. So what moments does it get louder? What moments does it, decrease? Is it something where there's a team that's on offense, that's the opposing team, that's a visiting team, that all of a sudden they pump a lot of noise out there so you can't hear as a football player. And then, when it's the opposite team, there's no noise. When it's the home team, and you can hear everything that's being said. Is that fair for an athlete? Is that fair for someone to have to go through? Is that a fair environment?
But it's like you said, it's how you adjust. The Patriots don't have that advantage as much anymore with Brady moving on. But that's an organization, I think, that has adapted to every turn. It would always look, well, this dynasty is finished. Oh, they're still here. They're still relevant. I think they'll probably still be relevant anyway, because it comes down to the top man himself, Bill Belichick. He is the coach. He runs it like a well-oiled machine, and it doesn't matter who's at the helm. We'll wait and see what happens with Cam Newton and see whether or not they do well or not. Obviously, Tampa Bay will probably be all right as well with Brady at the helm, and obviously he's got a point to prove that I shouldn't have been cut from the Patriots.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think they've done such a good job of adapting and adjusting throughout the years, and they've definitely kind of walked that fine line of, is this against the rules or is this not? They've gotten away with a lot of things. They've gotten in trouble for a lot of things. But, what they've always done is not stayed, stagnant with their development, with what they're doing. They've always been able to try and do something for the betterment of their team. And I think that kind of philosophy, that mindset for an organization is why they've remained the dynasty that they've been. I mean, obviously, having a guy like Brady is something that, has been extremely beneficial for them. But, you do have a guy like Belichick who's, kind of steering the ship, saying, here's where we need to get a little better, and here's the adjustments we should make. And, if this is within the rules, let's do it. Or if this is still kind of teetering, let's still try it, because, we could certainly get an enhancement through that. So also looking at that, I think it's something that, while Brady's a tremendous player, you can look back on some of the teams he's had too. You could say they lost some key pieces, but they haven't necessarily missed a beat. Guys have developed. They've got good replacement guys in place where they've said, hey, look, we're going to get someone else, to fill that void. And, you're not going to, miss a beat, because we've done our homework, we've done our scouting, and we believe that, they're going to be just as good as the player that was there previously.
Do you think that's a mindset of, and you talked about fear previously in the episode, do you think, and I can't remember what the acronym when it's positive, but you know where I'm coming from with this.
Yep.
Do you think that's a mindset of people viewing fear as bad versus necessary fear being good?
I think it's comforting in a way where they know if they go into an environment like that from another team, that they know that the Patriots understand how to develop you as a player. They're going to do what's best for your best interest, but also, you know, you don't second guess a team like that that's been able to kind of stay relevant for the last 20 years because they know what they're doing. And so, you know, you're not playing with your own emotions, playing with your own mind, second guessing yourself, your decisions based on that, because you know you kind of say, hey, look, I'm going to put my trust in this organization. But you know, I think it's both ways. You got to get the right pieces in place though too. And so, you know, there's been some big names that have gone there and been cut, been let go, that didn't work out. And whether it was just, you know, the twilight of their career, maybe it was an ego, maybe they didn't buy into the system, who knows? But you know, the one thing that I could say with the Patriots, they've done tremendously well for the last 20 years is they've been real, they've been honest, and they've been able to get guys in place. And when they feel like they don't have a good fit, they've been able to cut the bait. But they've also been able to see, hey, look, this guy could potentially fit into our system, fit into our scheme. Let's develop him, as opposed to let's, you know, let him go because he's not the player that was here in the past. And you know, I think there's no better example than probably a guy like Tom Brady, who was a 6th-round pick. They put some trust in him, saying, hey, they saw something in him, especially because he was a co-starter at Michigan. He didn't even start, you know, every game his senior year. And so, you know, they viewed him as a project, but they saw something in his ability that maybe he could fit in the system, and ultimately got an opportunity. But when that opportunity came, you know, he was able to thrive. And I think part of it was because of his work ethic, his desire to kind of prove people wrong. I think the other part of it was probably because they probably developed him in the right way, so that when, you know, faced with that challenge, you know, he was kind of ready to go, as opposed to being wrapped up in the things he can't control. So a guy like Cam, you know, Cam's a stud himself, and so I think, you know, they've done their homework on him as far as, you know, who he is as an athlete. You know, and I think if he's healthy, he could do a lot of, you know, good things for that team. But you know, I think some of the guys they have that they're developing in the wings could be pretty good too. And I think you've seen that in some examples of some guys that have gone through as Brady's backups, in Matt Castle, for instance, who, you know, played very sparingly at USC. A guy like Jimmy Garoppolo, you know, he went to a small school, who ultimately was traded for a 1st-round pick. And, you know, he's had some success with the 49ers. It's not a big contract. But I think their scouting is second to none to a lot of teams in the NFL. But I think a lot of it's based on, you know, how they're able to kind of see people, but also, you know, see how they fit in certain spots for that team and organization.
And my penultimate question to you, Sean, is if you had to sit down with any athlete, or for that matter, coach, dead or alive, who would that be and why?
It's interesting. It's a really interesting conversation, because it goes back to kind of my youth as who are athletes that I kind of, you know, I've always kind of been enamored by. But probably, you know, having a candid, honest conversation with, man, I might go with someone like a Tiger Woods. And, you know, he's living right now, but, you know, thinking about the way he grew up, you know, at a young age, and kind of being a phenom, having expectations, but also developing in a way that his father, from everything I've gathered, didn't put him in situations to fail. You know, put him in some golf tournaments where he was able to go out there and win. You know, as a 10-year-old, he wasn't playing against 16, 17-year-olds in competition. He was, you know, staying within his age group, but also, you know, some of the trials and tribulations for him through having success, his mentality, you know, his desire to go out there and hunger to execute. So I think there's a lot to it, for a guy like Tiger, that I'd love to have an open and honest, you know, candid conversation, just about just his development, but all on top of that, you know, what makes him tick, his mentality. I think you can look at a guy that's, like a Muhammad Ali, for instance, who's dealt with a lot of things throughout his life, a lot of decisions that, and being confident in making his decisions, but also, hearing his voice in his, competition of boxing, not just as as an athlete, but as a person, and being an activist and creating some change. But I think looking at all that, what's going on in his mind while he's doing that, throughout. A guy I always grew up liking was a guy, Michael Jordan. And so I was always kind of, curious about, what made him tick? How did he always thrive? How did it always seem like he had that game-winning shot? But what was his mentality to develop that hunger, that desire, but that confidence, so that when he had the ball in his hands, he was ready to go, as opposed to being fearful of that. And I think, we've seen a lot of kind of, behind the scenes with this Last Dance documentary, where we've been able to see, kind of the inner makings of a Michael Jordan, what drove him as a competitor, but also why he was never satisfied, and how he would find every little thing to kind of develop a quote unquote chip on his shoulder. And so that was kind of what fueled his fire, as opposed to saying, I've won this championship. I've, top athlete in the world. I've made X amount of money. I don't need to work out. I don't need to do all the things that make me great. And it was, I'm not going to let someone catch me, was kind of, the way that he would go about doing his thing. And he was always felt like he could find a slight somewhere, but that slight drove him. So I didn't fairly answer your question as far as one athlete, but those are three in itself that would be very interesting to have some conversations with, for sure.
My final question before we wrap up the episode: if you had to summarize what we've been speaking about into one sentence for people to take away, what would that be?
I think how we can create awareness to certain situations, so that we can normalize it in a way that no matter what happens, we can take something away from it. So how do we adjust? How do we adapt, so that next time, good or bad, whatever that situation may be, we're able to have some growth. I always tell a lot of my clients that it's only a mistake if we don't learn from it. So if we're not dwelling on outcomes and we're really focused on our process, and we're looking at a situation, and we're really taking away what we do differently next time, or what we would do the same, we're getting better. We're seeing growth by experience. And so I think it's important to kind of look at every situation as a situation. But the more that we can kind of move forward based on what's happened and become better, then a lot of times when we maybe had a negative moment, it's not really a mistake, but it's something that we can grow from. And I think, going back to what we talked about, I think if you look at a lot of top athletes throughout professional sport, they've had moments of maybe failure, moments where someone told them no. But looking at that, I know I'm giving you a long-winded answer, so it's more than one sentence, but kind of looking at that, that's what drove them, was learning from those situations, adapting. And so how can you do that in your everyday life, where I'm taking a situation that may be, negative, or maybe not what I wanted to have happen, or how I drew it up, and saying, well, yes, that happened, but because that happened, it's going to make me better, because I'm going to learn from it. And now when faced with a similar challenge, I know how to handle it based on past experience, past scenarios, so that, when faced with this again, I have control, because I know exactly what I'm going to do, and I know how to defeat this, as opposed to be fearful of it.
So once again, Sean, thanks again for coming on the Mindset Athlete podcast.
James, appreciate it. It was a pleasure, and we could talk for a couple more hours for sure. So certainly enjoyed you having me on, and look forward to continuing our conversations in the future as well.
I look forward to it. So once again, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
If you like this episode, please do share it with your friends, and do let me know what you thought of the episode by tagging me over on Instagram at James O. Roberts 11, and I'll spell that out again. That's James, the letter O, Roberts, and the number 11. And again, you can do the same on Twitter and Facebook. And in addition, if you had any follow-up questions, don't hesitate to shoot them over as well. And finally, don't forget to check Sean out over on Twitter at squinn23. So that's SQUINN, the number 23, and also via the website www.marwadconsultinggroup.com. So that's MOAWADCONSUTLING group.com. And as always, don't forget to check out my free content at fitamputee.co.uk and click on the tab resources. But not forgetting, I've also started a new Facebook group, especially for the podcast, which you can find by typing in The Mindset Athlete. And last but not least, and not forgetting, I've also rebranded my other Facebook group to AIM 24/7 Fat Burning Support Group. So come and check out the AIM tribe. The links will be in the description. You can find all the show notes at mindsetgame.libsyn.com under the category Psychology. So once again, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next week for another episode of the Mindset Athlete podcast.